I'm sorry, sir, but you need to leave now.
I have a reservation. Here's my email confirmation.
I don't care what it is, this is a private club, please leave.
Terry Mitchell stood at the entrance of Pinehurst Golf and Country Club, his worn golf bag slung over his shoulder, as the manager's words hung in the air like a slap. "I have a reservation," Terry said calmly, pulling out his phone to show the confirmation email. The manager, a sharp-faced man named Craig Ventura, didn't even glance at the screen. His eyes, cold, dismissive, traveled from Terry's faded polo shirt to the slight cloudiness in his left eye, a reminder of the accident that had nearly cost him his vision years ago. "I don't care what you think you have," Craig sneered. "This is a private club. We have standards here. I think you'd be more comfortable, goofing around the streets." Behind Craig, two security guards shifted their weight, hands moving toward their radios. Terry's jaw tightened. He quietly pulled out his phone again, this time opening his messages. His thumbs moved swiftly across the screen. They had no idea who he really was. Terry Mitchell was 53 years old, with salt and pepper hair cropped close to his scalp and a build that spoke of someone who'd stayed active despite life's attempts to slow him down. His left eye, damaged in a car accident when he was 28, had a milky quality that some people found unsettling. He'd learned to live with the stares. But golf? Golf was where none of that mattered. His father, Marcus Mitchell, had been a semi-professional golfer in the 1970s, one of the few black men who'd broken into the predominantly white country club circuit in South Carolina. Marcus never won the big tournaments, the doors weren't fully open back then, but he'd been brilliant. Precise. Elegant. Every Sunday, from the time Terry was 6 until Marcus died when Terry was 19, they'd hit the municipal courses together. Marcus would critique Terry's swing, adjust his grip, teach him to read the greens like a chess master reading the board. "Golf isn't about strength, son," Marcus would say, lining up a putt. "It's about vision. Seeing the shot before you take it. Seeing the world as it should be, not as it is." Terry had carried those words through college, through his MBA, through 25 years building his career in corporate investment and eventually into venture capital. He'd played golf at public courses, at charity tournaments, at company retreats. But he'd never joined a private country club. Not because he couldn't afford it. Because every time he tried, there'd been some excuse. The membership list was full. The initiation fees had just increased. The application process was under review. After his father died, Terry had promised himself that one day he'd walk through the doors of the most prestigious club in the state, not as a guest, not as a charity case, but as someone who belonged. Pinehurst Golf and Country Club was that place. Established in 1923, Pinehurst sat on 200 acres of pristine rolling hills in the western part of the state. The clubhouse was a colonial mansion with white columns and manicured gardens. The course itself was legendary, 18 holes designed by a Scottish architect, with views that had been featured in golf magazines for decades. For the last 6 months, Terry had been working behind the scenes on something that would change Pinehurst forever. But today, he'd simply wanted to play a round of golf. The reservation had been made under his name 3 weeks ago. He'd called, confirmed, paid the guest fee. Everything was legitimate. But now, standing in the marble-floored lobby with its crystal chandeliers and oil paintings of stern-faced founders, Terry could feel the familiar weight of judgment. Craig Ventura, the club manager, was in his early 40s, with slick-back blonde hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He wore a navy blazer with the Pinehurst crest embroidered on the breast pocket, and he carried himself like a man who'd spent his entire life being told he was special. "Listen," Craig said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I don't know who you talked to on the phone, but there's been a mistake. We're a members-only facility. Guests must be accompanied by members. Those are the rules." Terry's voice remained steady. "I spoke with Sandra in reservations. She said that on weekdays, the club accepts outside guests for a premium fee. I paid that fee." Craig's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "Sandra is new. She doesn't understand our culture here. The word culture landed like a stone. Terry glanced around the lobby. 3 elderly white men sat in leather armchairs near the fireplace, pretending to read newspapers while clearly listening to every word. A woman in tennis whites walked past, her gaze sliding over Terry like he was invisible. "So what you're saying," Terry said slowly, "is that despite having a confirmed reservation and paying your fee, you're refusing me service." Craig's expression hardened. "What I'm saying is that Pinehurst maintains certain standards. We cater to a specific clientele. I'm sure there are other courses that would be more suitable for you." One of the security guards, a thick-necked man with a crew cut, stepped forward. "Sir, you need to leave the premises." Terry didn't move. His phone buzzed in his hand, a response to the message he'd sent. He glanced at the screen, then looked back at Craig. "I'd like to speak with the board of directors," Terry said. Craig actually laughed. "The board? You think the board has time to deal with every random person who wanders in off the street? I think they'll make time for me." Something in Terry's tone made Craig pause. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then his arrogance returned. "Get him out of here," Craig told the guards. The crew-cut guard reached for Terry's arm. "I wouldn't do that," Terry said quietly. The guard's hand stopped an inch from Terry's shoulder. Craig's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and his expression shifted, confusion, then concern. He answered. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." Craig's voice had changed, suddenly deferential. He listened for a long moment, his face going pale. "But sir, yes, sir. Right away, sir." He lowered the phone slowly, staring at Terry with something that might have been fear. "Mr. Whitmore wants to see you in the boardroom," Craig said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Immediately." As Terry followed Craig through the clubhouse's oak-paneled hallways, past trophy cases and photographs of championship teams, his mind drifted back 6 months. He'd been sitting in his office at Mitchell Ventures, the investment firm he'd founded 15 years ago, when his legal team brought him an opportunity. Pinehurst Golf and Country Club was in financial trouble. Despite its prestige, the club had been hemorrhaging money for years. Membership was declining as younger generations showed less interest in the traditional country club lifestyle. The facilities needed millions in renovations. The previous board had made a series of disastrous investments, and now the club was on the verge of bankruptcy. A consortium of developers wanted to buy the property, tear down the clubhouse, and build luxury condos. But there was another option. Terry had assembled a group of investors, people he'd worked with for years, some of the smartest financial minds in the region, and put together a rescue package. They would inject capital into the club, restructure the debt, modernize the facilities, and transform Pinehurst into a sustainable, inclusive institution. The catch? Terry's group would acquire a controlling stake in the club. He would become the chairman of the board. The negotiations had taken months. The old guard, wealthy families who'd controlled Pinehurst for generations, had resisted. But economics didn't care about tradition. The club needed money, and Terry had it. 3 days ago, the final paperwork had been signed. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Terry Mitchell was officially the majority owner and chairman of the board of Pinehurst Golf and Country Club. He'd planned to announce it formally at next week's board meeting. But Craig Ventura's behavior had changed his plans. The boardroom was exactly what Terry expected, a long mahogany table, leather chairs, walls lined with portraits of past club presidents, all men, all white, all long dead. 5 people sat around the table. At the head was Richard Whitmore, 72, silver-haired and impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. He'd been club president for the last decade and had fought the hardest against Terry's acquisition. But in the end, numbers didn't lie. Bankruptcy or survival. Those were the choices. Next to him was Patricia Hendricks, 65, a former state senator and one of the few board members who'd supported the deal. She gave Terry a slight nod. The others, Thomas Chen, an orthopedic surgeon, Margaret Bellamy, heir to a textile fortune, and David Rosewood, a retired banker, watched Terry with varying degrees of curiosity and discomfort. Craig stood near the door, looking like he wanted to disappear into the woodwork. "Mr. Mitchell," Richard said, standing and extending his hand. "I apologize for the misunderstanding." Terry shook his hand but didn't smile. "Misunderstanding? Is that what we're calling it?" Richard's jaw tightened. Craig was not informed of the ownership transition. "That's my fault. I wanted to handle the announcement personally next week." "But he was informed of our guest policy," Terry said. "The policy that explicitly states weekday guest reservations are accepted." Craig cleared his throat. "Mr. Mitchell, I didn't realize." "You didn't realize I was the new owner," Terry interrupted. "But that's not actually the issue, is it? Because you refused me service before you knew who I was. You made assumptions based on how I looked. Based on my eye. Based on my skin color." The room went silent. Margaret Bellamy shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sure Craig simply made a judgment call based on maintaining our standards," Terry said, using air quotes. "Those were his exact words. That I should find a course more suitable for me. That I should be goofing around the streets." Patricia Hendrick's eyes narrowed. "He said that?" Craig's face had gone from pale to red. "I was trying to protect the club's reputation. We've had issues with..." "With what?" Terry's voice was steel. "With people who don't look like your typical member. People with disabilities. People of color." "That's not what I meant," Craig stammered. "Then what did you mean?" No answer. Terry turned to the board. "Let me be very clear about something. When I agreed to invest in this club, it wasn't just about saving a golf course. It was about transformation. This institution has existed for 100 years on exclusion. On making people feel like they don't belong. That ends now." Richard leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Mitchell, I understand you're upset." "I'm not upset," Terry said. "I'm determined. This club will become a model for inclusion. We will actively recruit members from diverse backgrounds. We will train staff on unconscious bias. We will create scholarship programs for young golfers who can't afford the fees. And anyone, staff or member, who doesn't embrace this vision will find themselves no longer welcome here." He looked directly at Craig. "Starting with you." Craig's eyes widened. "You can't fire me. I've been here for 15 years. My family has been members for 3 generations. Your employment is at will," Patricia Hendrick said calmly, pulling out a tablet and scrolling through documents. "And according to the new bylaws that took effect this morning, the chairman has authority to dismiss staff for conduct unbecoming of the club's values. This is ridiculous." Craig turned to Richard. "Sir, you can't let this happen." Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Craig, you've been a dedicated employee. But what happened today was unacceptable. You embarrassed this club and violated the principles we're trying to build. I'm sorry, but Mr. Mitchell is right." Craig's face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, disbelief. Finally, he turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The days following Craig's dismissal were chaotic. Word spread quickly through Pinehurst's membership. Some members resigned immediately, writing angry letters about political correctness and the destruction of tradition. Good riddance, Terry thought as he read each one. But others surprised him. A 78-year-old former judge named Harold Fleming called Terry's office personally. "Mr. Mitchell," Harold said, his voice gravelly with age, "I've been a member of Pinehurst for 43 years. I've watched this place stagnate, watched it become a museum to a past that wasn't even that great to begin with. What you're doing. It's about damn time. Count me in." Harold became Terry's unexpected ally, reaching out to other longtime members and explaining the vision. Some listened. Some didn't. Patricia Hendricks proved invaluable. She'd been pushing for reform for years but had been outvoted by the old guard. Now, with Terry as chairman, she had the authority to implement real change. Together, they hired a new club manager, Maria Santos, a 42-year-old hospitality professional who'd managed integrated resorts in Florida and California. She was Latina, openly gay, and absolutely brilliant at her job. Within 2 weeks, Maria had reorganized the staff, implemented new training programs, and begun reaching out to local communities that had never felt welcome at Pinehurst. But not everyone was happy. It started small. Reservations mysteriously disappearing from the system. Equipment going missing. Negative reviews appearing online with suspicious timing. Then it escalated. One morning, Terry arrived at the club to find graffiti spray painted across the front entrance, "Go back where you came from." Maria called the police immediately. They took a report, promised to investigate, but Terry knew how these things went. The vandals would probably never be found. What bothered him more was the reaction from some of the members. In the locker room, he overheard two men talking. "I'm not saying they deserved it," one said, a real estate developer named Kyle Brennan. "But what did they expect? You can't just come in and change everything overnight." The club was fine the way it was, the other agreed. Terry stepped into view. Both men went silent. "Gentlemen," Terry said evenly. "The club was not fine. It was dying. And if you think racist graffiti is an acceptable response to trying to save it, perhaps you should reconsider your membership." Kyle bristled. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm clarifying expectations," Terry said. "This is not a debate about whether Pinehurst should be inclusive. That decision has been made. The only question is whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem." Kyle stepped closer, his voice low and mean. "You might own this place on paper, Mitchell. But you'll never really belong here. People like you. People like me." Terry's voice was quiet but dangerous. Kyle seemed to realize he'd crossed a line. He backed off, muttering something under his breath, and left. But Terry knew this was far from over. 2 weeks later, Patricia called Terry in a panic. "We have a problem," she said. "A big one." She arrived at his office with a folder full of documents. Sitting across from his desk, she spread them out. "Some of the former board members are trying to overturn the acquisition," she explained. "They're claiming you misrepresented the financial situation, that you coerced Richard Whitmore into agreeing to the deal." Terry scanned the documents. It was a lawsuit, filed by a group calling themselves the Pinehurst Legacy Foundation. The names on the filing included Margaret Bellamy, David Rosewood, and 3 former board members who'd resigned after the acquisition. "This is ridiculous," Terry said. Every transaction was reviewed by lawyers on both sides. Everything was transparent. "I know," Patricia said. "But they're not trying to win in court. They're trying to create enough chaos and negative publicity that your investors pull out. If you lose funding, the deal collapses." Terry sat back, thinking. Who's their lawyer? Patricia slid another document across the desk. Harrison and Cole. Specifically, James Harrison III. Terry knew the name. Harrison and Cole was one of the oldest law firms in the state, with deep connections to old money families. James Harrison III was exactly what you'd expect, Ivy League educated, country club Republican, probably had a yacht named Manifest Destiny. "They're going to leak this to the press," Terry said. "They already have." Patricia pulled up an article on her phone from the state's largest newspaper. New golf club owner faces legal challenge over controversial acquisition. The article was biased, presenting the lawsuit's allegations as credible while barely mentioning Terry's side. Can you believe they treated him like this? Terry said to himself, echoing the structure he'd been taught. Then, louder, what would you do in this situation? Fight back in court, or fight back in the court of public opinion? He already knew his answer. Terry called an emergency press conference. Maria worked her contacts in local media. Patricia reached out to state-level journalists. Within 48 hours, they had a room full of reporters at the Pinehurst clubhouse. Terry stood at a podium, the pristine golf course visible through the windows behind him. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I want to address the lawsuit that was filed against me this week, and I want to talk about what's really happening at Pinehurst Golf and Country Club." He laid out the facts methodically: the club's financial crisis, the transparent negotiation process, the legal reviews, the board votes. Then he shifted gears. "But this lawsuit isn't really about finances," Terry said. "It's about fear. Fear of change. Fear of a club that doesn't look like it did in 1923. Fear of people like me, a black man with a disability, having a seat at the table." He pulled up a slide showing demographics. In the last 100 years, Pinehurst has had 0 black members. 0 members with visible disabilities. 3 women, all of whom joined in the last decade. These aren't accidents. They're choices. Another slide appeared, photos of Terry's youth golf initiative, showing kids from inner-city schools learning to play. "We're changing that. We've partnered with local schools to offer free golf clinics. We've created needs-based scholarships. We've renovated our facilities to be ADA compliant. In 3 months, we've done more for accessibility and inclusion than this club did in a century." A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Mitchell, your critics say you're destroying the club's traditions. What's your response?" Terry smiled. "My father used to tell me that tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. The traditions worth keeping are the ones that make us better: excellence in the sport, respect for the game, camaraderie. The traditions worth abandoning are the ones based on exclusion and prejudice." Another reporter: "What about the graffiti incident?" "It was hateful and cowardly," Terry said. "But it also proved exactly why this work matters. There are people who are so threatened by inclusion that they resort to vandalism. That tells me we're doing something right." The press conference went viral. Local news picked it up. Then regional. Then national. Within days, Terry was being interviewed on sports talk shows, featured in golf magazines, and invited to speak at DEI conferences. The narrative had shifted. The lawsuit went to court 3 months later. James Harrison III was everything Terry expected: polished, confident, dripping with inherited privilege. He presented the Pinehurst Legacy Foundation's case with theatrical flair, painting Terry as an opportunist who'd exploited a vulnerable institution. But Terry's legal team was better. They brought receipts. Every email, every financial document, every board meeting minute. They showed that not only had Terry been transparent, but he'd actually offered more favorable terms than other potential buyers. They called Richard Whitmore as a witness. "Mr. Whitmore," Terry's lawyer asked, "did Mr. Mitchell coerce you into this agreement?" Richard, looking older and more tired than he had 6 months ago, shook his head. "No. He offered us a lifeline. I didn't like it, didn't like losing control, but it was the right decision for the club's survival." Did he misrepresent anything? No. If anything, he was more honest than we were. We'd been hiding our financial problems for years. The plaintiff's case crumbled. But the most powerful moment came when Terry himself took the stand. James Harrison III cross-examined him aggressively, trying to paint him as someone with a grudge, someone trying to take over a white institution out of spite. "Isn't it true, Mr. Mitchell, that you were denied membership at several country clubs over the years?" "Yes," Terry said calmly. "And isn't it true that you harbor resentment about that?" "I harbor awareness," Terry corrected. "Awareness that exclusion damages everyone, not just the people being excluded, but the communities that practice it. Pinehurst was dying because it refused to evolve. I didn't save it out of resentment. I saved it because I believe in what it could become." "But you fundamentally changed its character." "I fundamentally saved its existence," Terry interrupted. "There's a difference." Harrison tried another angle. "Your father was a golfer, correct?" "Yes. And he never achieved significant professional success." Terry's jaw tightened. "My father was one of the most talented golfers of his generation. He didn't achieve significant professional success because people like your clients made sure doors stayed closed to people like him. Isn't this really about vindicating your father's failed career? My father's career wasn't a failure, Terry said, his voice steel. He played a game he loved despite every obstacle placed in his path. He taught me that excellence isn't measured by trophies, it's measured by integrity. And he would be proud of what I'm doing, not because I'm settling scores, but because I'm opening doors he never got to walk through. The courtroom was silent. The judge ruled in Terry's favor 2 weeks later, dismissing all claims and ordering the plaintiffs to pay Terry's legal fees. 6 months after the trial, Pinehurst hosted its first integrated championship tournament. The Pinehurst Invitational was Terry's vision, a tournament that prioritized skill over pedigree, with spots reserved for golfers from underrepresented communities, golfers with disabilities, and young amateurs who'd never had access to elite competitions. 200 players competed over 3 days. Among them, a 17-year-old Latina girl from the youth program Terry had started. A 45-year-old black man who'd learned golf at a municipal course in Atlanta. A 32-year-old veteran who'd lost his right arm in Afghanistan and played with a prosthetic. The media coverage was extensive. ESPN sent cameras. Golf Digest ran a feature. The tournament became a statement: golf could be excellent and inclusive. On the final day, Terry stood on the 18th green, watching the leaders finish their rounds. The crowd was different from the old Pinehurst crowds, more diverse, louder, more joyful. Patricia stood next to him. "Your father would be proud," she said. Terry nodded, his throat tight. "I wish he could have seen this." "Maybe he can," Patricia said, gesturing to the sky. The tournament winner was the 17-year-old girl, Isabella Rodriguez, who'd started playing golf just 2 years ago through Terry's scholarship program. She sank a 20-foot putt on the final hole to win by 1 stroke. The crowd erupted. Terry presented her the trophy personally, and when she hugged him, tears streaming down her face, he felt something break open in his chest, all the years of exclusion, of fighting, of proving himself, finally giving way to this moment of pure possibility. That evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the sun was setting over the 18th hole, Terry walked the course alone. He stopped at the spot where his father had taught him to read greens, where Marcus Mitchell had said, "Golf is about vision. Seeing the shot before you take it. Seeing the world as it should be, not as it is." Terry pulled out his phone and opened his photos. There was a picture of him and his father from 30 years ago, standing on a municipal course, both holding clubs, both grinning. "We did it, Dad," Terry said softly. "We opened the doors." Behind him, he heard footsteps. He turned to find Maria approaching. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "But I thought you'd want to know, we just got 50 new membership applications. All from the people who watched the tournament." Terry smiled. "Diverse applicants?" "Very. Good." They stood together in the fading light, looking at the course that had once represented everything Terry couldn't have and now represented everything he'd fought to change. "You know what the best part is?" Maria said. "What?" 5 years from now, kids like Isabella won't think any of this is remarkable. They'll grow up assuming golf is for everyone. That clubs like this are inclusive. They won't know how hard you fought for it." Terry considered this. That's exactly how it should be. 2 years later, Pinehurst Golf and Country Club was thriving. Membership had doubled. The facilities had been renovated. The course was ranked among the top 50 in the country. More importantly, it looked different. On any given day, you could see families of every background on the greens. The scholarship program had grown to serve 200 kids annually. The club had become a model that other institutions studied. Terry received awards, speaking invitations, offers to consult for other organizations trying to become more inclusive. But his favorite moments were simpler. Like the afternoon when an elderly black man approached him in the clubhouse, tears in his eyes. "I just wanted to shake your hand," the man said. "I'm 76 years old. I've played golf my whole life at public courses, never thought I'd step foot in a place like this. And here I am. Thank you. Or the day when Craig Ventura, the manager he'd fired, sent him an email. Mr. Mitchell. I owe you an apology that's 2 years overdue. What I did was wrong. How I treated you was inexcusable. I've spent the last 2 years reflecting on my biases and trying to be better. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that what you've built at Pinehurst is remarkable. You were right. About everything. Respectfully. Craig Ventura. Terry read the email twice, then wrote back. Craig. Thank you for reaching out. Growth requires courage. If you're serious about doing better, I'd be happy to talk. Best. Terry. Because that's what this was all about, not revenge, but transformation. Not punishing the people who'd kept doors closed, but building a world where those doors stayed open. On the wall of Terry's office, next to his degrees and awards, hung a single photograph, him and his father on that municipal course, both holding clubs, both grinning. Underneath, a quote from Marcus Mitchell. See the world as it should be, not as it is. Terry had spent his life seeing that world. And now, finally, he'd built it. What would you do if you were refused entry somewhere you had every right to be? How would you respond to injustice? Terry Mitchell chose to fight, not with anger, but with excellence. Not by tearing down, but by building up. In the face of bias and injustice, courage and determination always win. If this story inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of people who refused to accept the world as it was and fought to make it better. And let us know in the comments, what doors are you working to open? What change are you fighting for? Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.